you? I saw you around somewhere. I saw you. I guess he's back in town. Maybe making sure that we're still online in here. Hope that everybody has had a good week. Relatively speaking, we're healthy, we're here, and that's a good thing. Briscoe's back with us. Terry is still able to be back with us. Sister Jamie is here. So we got babies in the house. Mallory sounding off this morning. That's good. Kind of works his Branson back up. That's good. We in this class have been studying the parables of Jesus and been going through the ones in Matthew and then last week some in Mark. And Mark's the gospel of action, so there's not a lot of talking from Jesus, nearly as much as some other gospels. Therefore, there aren't many parables. And there's just really one other parable, and it was dealing with something that really doesn't relate to us too much, because there's a parable talking about how a fig tree, you know that a fig tree is about to have figs based on certain signs that you see in the fig tree. The way the leaves are coming out at a certain time of year is okay, it's fruit bearing time. Jesus told that parable to his crowd back then to get them ready for the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. Well, we're not living back then, we're not in Jerusalem, so we don't really have to get ready for that. But, you know, the theme or the principle behind that parable is relevant to us. We've always want to be ready for whatever is coming our way, what's coming our way from God, what's coming our way from the devil. We've got to be willing to take evasive action to see it and avoid it. What's coming to us from Him, and what's coming to us from God, we want to see it and embrace those blessings. And the greatest of blessings is the return of Jesus. And there are no signs. There are no signs in our Bible that specifically outline when Jesus is coming. There's some misunderstanding of verses in that direction, but Jesus himself said, "No man knows, not even the Son of Man, not even the Son of God knows when He's going to return." So you see these things going on, and people make predictions. There have always been wars, always been earthquakes, always been bad things. This is not new, and so the only prophecy in our Bible now that is unfulfilled is the return of Jesus. That's the list. There are a lot of prophecies in our Bible. They've all been fulfilled except for that one. And how do we get ready for that day? How do we know we're going to be ready on that day? We need to be ready every day. And it's a great fundraising tool. Many religious groups just say Christ is coming back in X amount of days and you need to get right. And one of the ways you get right is to pay your vows and do certain things. And then that date passes. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because there's somebody somewhere predicting the return of Jesus on every date of the calendar. And that person that's going to get it right one day. I don't believe in luck, but it will be just kind of a lucky thing. They're going to be pretty proud of themselves, aren't they? You know, finally somebody gets it right. Yeah, Linda? Yeah, they're going to be proud momentarily, I would say. That's a very good point. So, let's go over to the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke has parables that are really familiar to us. They're our favorites in a sense. They're ones that hit home, that help us, that step on our toes some, that step on other folks' toes some. But so we're gonna launch out into maybe the best known parable Jesus ever told, the parable of the Good Samaritan. This is Luke 10. You've probably got it marked in your Bible. Luke 10, verse 25 and following. And behold, a certain lawyer. Doesn't it seem like half the time it's one of those types, a lawyer? Lawyers do what? Back in those days, they knew the law. That's what they did. It's not so much criminal, civil lawyers like we think, or attorneys like we think of today. It's people that study the old law. So a lawyer stood up. Maybe he stood up out of respect. Maybe he stood up to be heard. Maybe he stood up because, hey, I'm about to put on a show for you folks. I'm going to humiliate Christ. He said, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said to him here in 26, "What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? That's reasonable. You'd ask a lawyer about the law. Okay? You notice here that Jesus did not say, in response to the question, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He did not say nothing. You don't have to do anything. I'm going to take care of all this at Calvary. How popular is that message these days? Do you listen to preachers on the internet or television, or some of your coworkers talk about how grace is so amazing? And it really is. Grace is so amazing that I heard one speaker say, we do not contribute, and he used this word, ancient word, we do not contribute one whit, W-H-I-T, one whit to our salvation. That Jesus has done it all for us, that we are under no obligation to do anything. And we understand that it's kind of like, this is not the best analogy. Y'all remember the illustration of this big elephant and this flea? They walk across one of these swinging bridges, and the flea's actually attached to the elephant. And they get across the bridge, and it's been shaking and all that, going crazy. And the flea says, look what we did. And the flea, we understand, had very little or nothing to do with it. That's kind of like us in comparison to Christ. We as compared to what Jesus has to do with our salvation, we very little. But that very little is very important. And this parable illustrates that. Jesus had a perfect opportunity to say, by grace, you're saved of all your sins. I'm doing everything for you. You just go out and live any way you want to live, and I'll say, well done. That's not taught in a lot of pulpits. And you can understand the motivation behind that. That's popular. That's easy. I go into a store. Here's the way some of you are not wired this way, but probably a lot of you are. I go into a store. I'm looking for the clearance rack. I'm looking for the clearance rack. When I pull up to the gas pump, I'm looking for the best price. This week, first time in my life, I pushed the wrong button. And I paid for Supreme. That's the first time in my life that's happened. And I did not realize I pushed the wrong button until I saw that thing going. And can you believe that? But we all, most of us, we want the best deal. We have a tendency to buy the cheaper product. Sometimes that reasoning backfires on us. We're getting junk. Religiously speaking, then, a lot of folks, they want to embrace a message that says, all is good. You got it made. God loves you so much, it's impossible for him to punish you. Just live your life. Eat, drink, and be merry. Another place the message is what Jesus says, and that's not so popular sometimes, right? Repent, assemble, give, deny myself, carry a cross every day, love my enemies. I mean, that's a high price. It's expensive and it's tough. And this parable is a tough one, talking about what we get to do, not got to, get to, in order to be pleasing to the Father. So what is written in the law? What is your reading of? 27. So he answered and said, this is the lawyer talking to Christ, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. 28, and he said to him, you have answered rightly. Do this, and you'll live. So if you don't do this, you'll not. If you do this, you'll live. If you don't do this, you won't live. Verse 29, but he wanting to justify himself. Isn't that human nature? We all want to justify himself. I was angry, but you don't know how she is. No, I didn't do this, but you don't know what they did to me. And so we can blame our parents, we can blame the government, blame our neighbors. So he wants to justify himself. So it tells me he's not real keen to be a good neighbor to everybody. So he says to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Now he's expecting, in law, I believe they teach you, if you have a witness, never ask him a question that you don't know how he's going to answer. So this lawyer has asked Jesus a question. He's assuming that Jesus is going to answer it in a way that says, Well, your neighbor is somebody who's good to you. Because that's the way most folks defined neighbor back then. And maybe some of that is still in us. You know, who's our neighbor? Oh, our neighbor's that good fella who shares their vegetables with me. Our neighbor's the fella who, brings my dog back when he gets over in their neighborhood, in their yard. My neighbor's the one who comes over and checks on me. If I haven't seen it, then my neighbor's the one who checks my mail when I'm out of town for a few days. But Jesus is going to say, no, that's not the definition of a neighbor at all. A neighbor is somebody who needs something from us. Not somebody who's supplying a need, but somebody who has a need. And that's so contrary to what this lawyer was expecting. And he illustrates it with this wonderful parable. Jesus answered and said, in response to the question, who is my neighbor? A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. If you look at it geographically, it literally is down. Jericho is higher than Jerusalem is, so he goes down. No, excuse me. Jerusalem is higher than Jericho. He goes down from Jerusalem. Jerusalem, if you see a picture of it, you kind of see it's kind of in a mountainous area, and things below it are like the city of Jericho. So he fell among thieves. They call that path, that road from Jerusalem to Jericho, the Bloody Pass, P-A-S-S. It's even still, I've seen pictures of it even now, and it's kind of a rocky place, good place for bad folks to hide, who stripped him of his clothing. So they leave the man naked. They wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. Why would they take his clothes? Because his clothes were valuable. These days, have you ever heard in recent years somebody rob somebody and they take their clothes? That just doesn't happen, does it? They take their cell phone, their jewelry, their billfold, their purse. Nobody's taking anybody's clothes as a general rule. Back in those days, they even took the clothes off folks. They take this man's garments.
Mostly, didn't they just have maybe one set of clothing?
Yeah, his clothes were scarce. You read Lydia Dorcas, what was her outstanding feature, right? She made clothes for people. The Proverb 31 woman, same kind of thing. We have closets with options. They did not. That's a very, very good point. It was a lot easier back in those days to figure out what you're going to wear. They had their daily uniform, basically. So they take his clothes. They wound him. I'm guessing, you don't want to get his blood on the clothes you're stealing, so you restrain him, take his clothes off of him, and then you beat him. And how bad they beat him? They left him half dead, which is essentially, they think, dead, right? They didn't want to leave a witness, so they've got his clothes, they've got whatever money, whatever else he had, and they're gone. Now, by chance, a certain priest, you see that word certain is used a lot in this story, right? A certain priest came down the road. Now, who's the priest? The priest, back in those days, was the go-between between the people and God. He's somebody that's supposed to be extra spiritual, supposed to be the first and obvious person to stop and help. We would maybe associate priest back then with preacher today. We should not, but we can and we do, right? We expect, I'm the same way. I expected the preachers I grew up with, Brother London, Brother Johnson, Brother Hilliard. I expected more of them than Brother Joe, Brother Bob, Brother Glenn. Why? That's the preacher. That's the priest. We expect his children to be better than other children. We expect their grandkids not to cry. We expect them to have the happiest of marriages. We expect them to be the most. It's just that comes with the territory, right? So we expect this guy to stop and help him. Yes, ma'am.
You're also priests.
Yeah, exactly. Peter calls us a royal priesthood, zealous for good works. So thankfully we all got promoted. We all got that memo. but dude, don't you kind of have that? Why don't you expect more of an elder? You know, a non-elder. You expect more of their wife than, I mean, that's so unfair. That's so unfair. God expects the best of everybody He saved, doesn't He? So, but anyhow, that's just kind of, and so Christ tells the story. The priest comes by, the crime scene. It's messy, it's bloody. I mean, guy's been left. This guy is pitiful looking, you can imagine. And a priest, so finally a hero has arrived to help him. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Why? Why did he go on the other side? Lots of possibilities. One, he just doesn't care. Obviously, that's got to be the headline reason. If he cared, he'd helped him. Another kind of excuses, maybe he's scared that the robbers are still there. If he goes near him, they're going to get him too. Maybe he's concerned he's going to offer sacrifices, and if he gets near somebody, maybe thinks he's dead. He'll be unclean, and there are several issues. But the fundamental thing is he just didn't care about him. Gets as far away from that opportunity to serve as possible. Verse 32, likewise a Levite. Also in their day, that's a super spiritual person. When he arrived at the place, came and looked. It's like he walked over. Why is he looking? See if he's still alive. See if there's anything left for him to take. Do I know him? Do I recognize this guy? If it's a Jew, I'll help him. If it's a Gentile, I won't. This is extra egregious, it seems to me. And then he passes by on the other side. So this fellow, is he able? We don't know. Is he able to yell out to him, help me? They hear him moaning. Is that what got their attention, to draw them nearer to him? Verse 33, but a certain Samaritan. There's that word certain again. A Samaritan. When we read Samaritan, we don't read what the typical audience of this would have read, or the typical hearer. This lawyer, when he hears Samaritan, he thinks dog. Dog. Samaritan, dog, same thing. They might like dogs better. And back in those days, dogs were not pets, they were mongrels. They not desirable. But he hears Samaritan, he thinks something unclean, he thinks somebody dirty, he thinks somebody wicked, somebody that is useless, somebody that is, I don't want to have anything to do with. There is an absolute impossibility that this Samaritan can be the hero of the story. This is such a radical story that Jesus tells. So unpredictable. And a certain Samaritan, the most unlikely, as he journeyed, he's not the priest, he's not the Levite, he's a dog. He journeyed, he's busy, he didn't plan for this. As he journeyed, he came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion. We got to see first. We got to see the need to meet the need. He sees the need. His heart is touched by what he sees. So he went to him, bandaged his wounds. It was like he had a first aid kit with him. Bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. One of those would have been an anesthetic. One of those would have been more of a painkiller kind of thing. And set him on his own animal. Brought him to an inn and took care of him. He doesn't do the minimum. He does all that he can do. He's risking what? He's risking the loss of money. He's risking getting blood on his saddle. He's losing time. His trip he's involved in. He's significant inconveniences. Doesn't matter when you care about it. And this wasn't his cousin. This wasn't his mother in the ditch. This was an anonymous soul. We do this for a best buddy. That's not the point. We do this for somebody that just needs help. Verse 35, on the next day when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, which that's big money, gave them to the innkeeper and said to him, take care of him, and whatever more you spend when I come, I will repay you. So it tells you that he must have had a relationship with the innkeeper. This must have been a familiar path for him. Maybe he'd stayed there previously. Innkeeper seems to know I can trust him. And then here's the big finish to the parable. the question, so which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, he who showed mercy on him. Jesus said to him, go, here's an important word, do likewise. Do likewise. That was their assignment. That is our assignment. And I don't have to sell you on that. I'm thankful. This is an easy class today because we do try, don't we, to be good Samaritans. Sometimes it backfires. I've heard stories recently from two in our church who tried to go the extra mile to help somebody, and it didn't quite have the results that they would have desired. But we're doing good, not necessarily because it's always going to bear the fruit we expect. We do good because Jesus just there told us, do that. Do be a good neighbor. Help somebody who has a need. What if they don't appreciate it? That's not in the text. What if they'd never do it for us? That's not in the text. We're to do good. We're to be good stewards. We're to try to be safe. I've mentioned to us when we've talked about this in sermons and classes that if I were advising ladies, I would not stop. I'd not stop and help anyone. I'd call 911 and get the professional people to come and help. It's where I wish we could safely have our ladies. I don't know, we always have our men safely help. But any of you pick up hitchhikers? Any of you do that now? Linda raised a finger. You got to be careful with that, Linda.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Would you pick up a hitchhiker? Do you size them up? Do you look away? Do you feel guilty when you don't? Do you think, okay, what's their story? Do they look like a murderer or not? You know, if I stop, do they have somebody in the bushes ready? Isn't it a shame that we don't know? I think should I be ashamed of this? I think in my life I picked up one hitchhiker that I know of. And the reason I picked him up was because he looked like a guy who had been visiting us in our worship services. This is now I'm preaching in Mobile. And I waved to him. He waved back. I know that guy. This is going to be safe. Pulled over. He comes up, gets in my car, and I realize it's not him. It's a murderer that I picked up, right? And the Lord took care of me and got him where he needed to go. My wife, you husbands, those of you that are husbands, you got a wife. My wife, I don't know how she is exactly now. There was a time she's very trusting. We were living in Wilmer, Alabama. It's a Saturday night, late at night. I'm back in the bedroom, probably got my Bible over, doing some last minute studying or whatever, trying to memorize some things. Knocks on our door. Somebody does. I mean, it's like between 11 and midnight probably, and Judy goes to the door. Total stranger. And this house we lived in is remote, kind of way out the highway there. And she lets a total stranger in our house near midnight, comes back in the bedroom, and she says, there's this guy in our house. He says he's broken down and needs a ride over into Mississippi. We kind of live near Mississippi. I said, where is he? She said, he's in the house. And he wants to know if he can bring his ice chest in. It's got beer in it. And I said, what did you tell him? And she said, well, I'll ask my husband. And so, I get up, I go in there, and sometimes you do good because you have no option. That's not something I'm proud of, but we're in those situations. So I had to give that guy a ride over into Mississippi, and I'm just thinking, I hope Judy got a good look at him because he's going to kill me, and. My presence here indicates that I beat him up before he could beat me up. No, I didn't do that, but it's just a shame. I wish we could do good with calmness and confidence that everything's going to be all right. And I know maybe it's an indication of my lack of faith. I know that we need to have faith. Some of us are, without telling too much, we try to protect ourselves with certain permits and things. It's just crazy times. It really is. But it was pretty dangerous back then also, wasn't it? That Good Samaritan, he took some risk to help him, this fella. He spent some money. and he's the hero. The priest, the Levite, the guys that played it safe, didn't want their schedule, interrupted, didn't know him, therefore not going to help him. You see several laws, we say, or rules at work here. There's a golden rule, there's a silver rule, there's an iron rule. Right? Iron rule, might makes right. That's what the thieves were operating. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, there are more of us, less of you. We'll take what we want. The silver rule, kind of what the priest and Levite operating on, is don't do unto others what they would not do unto you. They didn't beat the man, but they didn't help the man. And then the golden rule, obviously. Had a military guy, asked me one time, he said, Jeff, you know what the golden rule is? I said, well, I think I do. But why don't you tell me it? He said, it's the one who has the gold rules. Now, that's not exactly it, is it? But maybe. But according to what we know, the golden rule is the rule operated on by the Good Samaritan. Do unto others as you need or want others to do unto you. If you're I in a ditch, we want somebody to stop. We want somebody to help us. So let's try to be that kind of person. Now, I'm not talking about literally driving down the highway necessarily, but there are daily opportunities to help somebody. We have, some of you helped the police officer family, Nick Reiser. You helped us feed his family a meal on Friday. That's the way of being a Good Samaritan. You gave as you were prospered today. That's the way Good Samaritan. You were friendly to our guests. That's being Good Samaritan. We have people here today who is tough. It's tough to come to worship. Come to worship in a new place. That's a risk also, and we need to be sensitive to that. When I was younger, one of the most frightening things for me was to go to an assembly where I didn't know anybody. I was like a guest, and so I try to keep that in my mind and we want to be we want to have a Chick-fil-A mentality. We want to do so well, the Chick-fil-A people say we need to step up to be more like the Tuscumbia people, right? There's so many ways to be a Good Samaritan. Can you want to suggest something here that I haven't mentioned? And I haven't mentioned a lot that I should have, I'm sure, but what's in your mind about being a Good Samaritan? Or something related to this parable? Say it again, I'm sorry.
We should be instinctive about it. Just when we see something, we should just do it automatically.
Like breathing,
Yeah. Or if we see someone in need, but now my father used to stop all the time like you're talking about and help people.
Yeah.
I don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got something that'll help us. We got that cell phone communication. I would think, just no expert, but you can pick somebody up. Hey, I'll give you a ride, but you mind me taking a picture of you and sending that to my wife so she'll know? But I agree, it should be an instinctive thing. It's just what we do. We're Christians, we help people. But again, I don't want us to be so fixated on helping that random person out there. That's obviously one of the points of the parable. But the headline here is, he who showed mercy on him. We're to be people who show mercy on others, and then understanding who our neighbor is. It's somebody who has a need. Everybody needs Jesus. We help meet that need. Yes, ma'am.
I had an accident one night about going on 11:30, and a total stranger helped me because I was way out in nowhere on the way home at Roseville.
Yeah.
And so you got to trust a little bit.
Yeah. Any of you, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Any of you men, would y'all be comfortable with your wives stopping and helping a stranger these days? Would you be comfortable with your daughter stopping and helping a total stranger? We wouldn't, would we? Isn't that a shame? Say it again. What, who?
Depends on if you brought her back or not.
Yeah, he'd bring her back pretty quick, I'm pretty sure, most of them. Yeah. when Jenna was traveling back up to Freed Hardeman and all, or some of you don't know that's our daughter. You know, she had some pretty firm instructions. You know, you see somebody has you call 911, get them to go help them. You do that. Phone is now our Good Samaritan device, which that helps. There are lots of ways to help people. Janie Simpson, she helps people. She doesn't like me to brag on her. She made a nice blanket for one of my grandkids. That's pretty cool. That's the way to be a Good Samaritan. You know, they just won't single her out. We had if you walk up the steps here to get to the 3rd floor, which I know it's going to take some effort for some of you young, spry people, but you'll see a bulletin board that was an eyesore. Now it's a work of art. That's because some of our teenage girls stepped up. They're Good Samaritans. You know that old green bench that used to sit out there, eyesore? Our kids painted that thing Wednesday night after kind of the back half of class, and they sanded it and did a lot of good things. It's going to look so much better when you see it out there. Got a few other things to finish up on it. The steps going up to the 3rd floor, they needed some paint. They taped it and they cleaned it and they did some painting, and that's about finished. You know what I mean? There are a lot of ways to be a Good Samaritan, and we got to be training our children. Best way to train them is to show them that in us, right? It's like, I appreciate you saying, you know, and others would say, my dad did this, my mom did this, and I do this. If mom and dad didn't do it, we're probably less inclined to do it as well. Yeah, where are you? Yeah.
I think in this, I don't think Jesus is mentioning the 2 that passed up the guy who was attacked to vilify him. I think he's just making the point that 2 out of 3 people didn't.
Exactly.
In the minority, you're in the minority when you stop and do things like this.
Yeah.
Even today and even then.
That reminds me, I saw some research, I guess from back when I was in college, I dated that, but about how likely is someone to help someone in distress. And they did this like on college campuses and maybe at other busy places, and they would have like a young lady pretend to have a twisted ankle where she needed help. If this young lady was in a remote place where it looked like nobody else would come by to help her, people were more inclined to stop and help. But if this happened in a busy sidewalk area, people were much less, they would think, okay, somebody else will stop, I don't need to. It's interesting, you know, you can look, you use your principle there, like 2/3 didn't help, 1/3 did. In several of Christ's parables, you can think about it mathematically, even with the parable of the talents, you know. I mean, how many of his parables have a 2/3 versus 1/3? You know, if we judge those 3 talent men as a group, well done. 2 out of the 3 did well, but we're not judged as a group. That's kind of good news and bad. I can be a part of a congregation that's involved in doing good, but it doesn't help me a bit if I'm not doing good. Or I can be involved in a congregation that doesn't do so much good, but I can be doing good despite what others are doing, and I can be blessed. Nobody's going to be judged collectively, right? But I do think it is telling that Jesus doesn't really spend a lot of energy indicting the priest and the Levite who didn't step up. His focus is on the positive. And we should probably be oriented that way too. I really hope that God helps me to focus more on the good that's happening and be happy rather than the bad that disappoints us. Because there's always going to be some bad that disappoints us. Right? But as a preacher, I'll tell on myself, as a preacher, when I stand up and preach, I'm scanning the audience. I'm trying to think about what I'm supposed to say. But I'm scanning who's here, who's not here. And sometimes, because I'm weak, I'll focus more on who's not here. What are they dealing with? Why aren't they here? Is that a symptom? Is that a sign they're moving further away from God? And I can focus on that, which I know that one sheep in need to, of course, but at the exclusion of the good news. You know, Brother Fristow is here. Linda's here. Doug is here. You're here. and focus on the good. You throw a party, you invite 50 people, 25 show up. You're going to be in a good mood because 25 came, or a bad mood because 25 didn't. It's just, let's focus on the positive. The positive in this is that one man did something that prompts us to also want to do something to be a blessing, to help people. Anybody? Sister John Blackwell, you look like you have such a great thought you want to share with us now. Am I misreading your face? I am?
I think you're doing a great job.
I don't think that was what you were thinking, but I appreciate you saying that. Nancy is here grieving this morning because her team got beat last night, and that's what she hadn't heard a word I've said. I got that this morning, but I understand. Anybody? Wesley, your kids travel back and forth to Tuscaloosa. You want them stopping? They're big, strong boys. You want them stopping and helping people?
Jeff,
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, Wesley. Yes, ma'am. He was finished. Saved by Granny. Yes, ma'am.
Gary picked up this guy one time and he wouldn't just write. And he asked Gary, said, "What do I owe you?" Gary said, "A nickel." And he opened the door and started running.
He wasn't going to pay a nickel.
Gary was seasoned, but he opened the door and started running though.
Well, back in the day, people like Gary and parents and all picked up. I mean, that's how people got from point. Ralph Foster told me that he used to get from here over somewhere where he was going to work, whatever day. Or school or something. I've forgotten. He hitchhiked every day. Certain places people pick him up. If you see somebody wearing a uniform, a lot of our military personnel back in the day, that's how they got to their deployment area, their training areas. They'd put on a uniform and go. Again, no more. Times I told y'all about the time I ran out of gas going to I was wearing preacher clothes. Ran out of gas up in Missouri. I mean, I'm not I'm flying. I'm throwing rocks at cars at that point, and they won't stop. Yes, sir.
Used to be a guy from Russell, Fountain, that's all he ever done was hitchhike. One day I seen him in Russell and he beat me from Russell Show.
Yeah. Let's help people. Have a great afternoon. Y'all come back tonight at 5:30 if you can, if you will, please.
My mom and daddy had a couple first cousins